The early morning wind swept through the valley, carrying with it a bitter chill and the metallic scent of dried blood. Elias Ward pulled back on the reins, his silver-gray eyes squinting as the wooden gate of the inherited cabin came into view. For a moment, he thought his eyes were deceiving him. 5 women hung from ropes, suspended like grim warnings right in front of the gate. Their tattered dresses fluttered in the wind, hair falling over their faces, bare feet swaying with the rhythm of a funeral drum. Pinned to each chest was a rough wooden sign, the letters scorched into the grain with a knife now clear in the dawn light. This ain't your land. What belongs to Morrison will always belong to Morrison. Elias tightened his grip on the reins, his throat suddenly dry. This land had been left to him by Uncle Jeremiah. A chance at a new beginning after the long years of war. But what greeted him was not the warmth of a frontier cabin. It was 5 lifeless bodies hung like a punch straight to the gut. His horse neighed loudly, restless. Elias swung himself down, his boots landing heavy on the frozen ground. He stepped closer, calloused hand trembling as it reached for the neck of one of the women. A faint pulse responded, then another. Still breathing in that cold wind, a spark lit deep in Elias's chest. This was no longer about inheritance. This was a bloody challenge from a force looking to devour this entire land, and if he chose to cut those ropes, it meant he was stepping straight into a storm that was bound to swallow everything in its path, even if it cost him his own life. The blade in Elias's hand gleamed as it sliced clean through the first rope. The woman's limp body dropped, but he caught her just in time. Her neck bore the angry red mark of the noose, her breath faint but still there. Without stopping to think, Elias moved from one to the next, cutting each rope, lowering all 5 of them gently to the ground. They lay in a row before the cabin gate, their bodies ice cold from the night air, but a few eyelids fluttered, caught between pain and unconsciousness. He flipped the knife and began cutting the bindings on their wrists and ankles. His hands trembled as he saw the bruised flesh, battered and stained, lashes crisscrossed like some cruel verdict etched into skin. Whoever did this had meant for them to die slow, to die in pain, and more important, to die as a warning to anyone foolish enough to set foot on this land. One by one, he dragged them under the cabin's front awning. Inside, it was pitch black, dust thick as morning cloth, but there was enough room for 5 broken bodies to lie down. Elias lit a fire. The flickering yellow glow slowly brought their faces into view. The first, black hair, sharp eyes, even in delirium. A gash on her cheek spoke of a fighter who had battled to her very last breath. The rancher lived alone for years. The second, red hair, cracked lips, but her posture remained proud, defiant. The third, a slender frame, golden blonde hair, a gentle face that carried grace even through suffering. The fourth, eyes dark as midnight, half-lidded but calculating, cloaked in mystery. The last, older chestnut hair, a calm presence like that of a mother protecting the others. Elias did not need to ask. He knew they had not been hung there by chance. They were chosen, and whoever was behind it wanted him to know that loud and clear. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the bitter scent of rope and the lingering smoke of gunpowder. Elias sat with his back to the cabin door, his Winchester laid across his lap. The firelight flickered in his weathered silver eyes, calling back memories of wars he had sworn were behind him. But the West never lets a man choose peace so easily. Uncle Jeremiah used to say, land is not just bought with money, it has to be held with blood. And now that truth stood plain before the cabin gate in the form of 5 trembling bodies. In that still silence, Elias understood. There was no turning back. If he saved them, he would have to face the kind of men who could hang women like flags at a gate. And if he left them behind, he would no longer be a man. A horse neighed ragged, shattering the silence. The black-haired woman opened her eyes first, flames flickering in the dark. Her neck was bruised deep red, her voice raw and broken. But it still came out like a command, do not leave us behind. Elias knelt beside her, gently pouring sips of water from his canteen into her parched mouth. She drank like she was swallowing life itself, and all the despair that came with it. Once her breathing steadied, she sat up, her gaze sharp as a blade cutting straight through him. "Do you realize you are walking straight into a storm?" Before Elias could answer, more groans echoed through the cabin. The red-haired woman pushed herself upright, fury flaring in her piercing blue eyes. The blonde stirred awake, exhausted, but her hand clung to Elias's shirt, desperate for something, anything to hold on to. The older woman moved quietly, helping each of them, her steady presence revealing what Elias already sensed. She had been the one holding them together through hell. The cabin filled with ragged breaths and the soft crackle of the fire. Elias poured more water, shared scraps of dry bread. No one said much, but their eyes all carried the same message, watchfulness, and a test of trust. At last, the brown-haired woman spoke. Her voice was low, firm, and spoke for them all. "We did not hang ourselves at that gate. That was a message from the man who owns this town now. He wants anyone setting foot here to see what it costs." Elias clenched his fist, knuckles going pale. He had suspected as much, but hearing it aloud made his blood boil. The redhead gave a bitter laugh, laced with fury and warning. "If you have any sense, you will get back on that horse and ride far away. We are dead. Wait. If you take us in, you will die with us." Elias looked up, his silver-gray eyes scanning each face before he spoke, voice low and resolute. "I cut those ropes. From that moment on, your fate is mine too." In the firelight, the black-haired woman pushed herself upright, her lips curled into a tired, defiant smile. "Then listen close, landowner. You did not just inherit a cabin. You just inherited a war." Her words dropped like gunfire in the night. Elias knew from that moment on, peace was no longer part of the bargain. The road ahead would not be about planting grass or raising cattle. It would be about blood and the shadows closing in around them. That night, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across scarred faces after war and makeshift bandages. The women slowly began to come to, still weak, but their eyes burned not with fear, but with the fire of those who had walked through hell and survived. The older woman, Grace, was the first to speak. Her voice was steady and deep, every word sounding carved in blood. "The man who strung us up at the gate is Morrison in town. He is a respected judge. But behind that black robe, he is a trafficker. He buys people, forges papers, turns women into property. We resisted, and this was the price." Elias clenched his jaw, veins tight across his neck. The name Morrison echoed from old war stories like the scent of death wrapped in the skin of a man. Ruby, the redhead, sat up straight, her eyes flaring with rage. "He burned my home to the ground and tried to force me to sign debt papers. I refused. That night, I was dragged away to the sound of my little sister screaming. I swore I would watch him bleed." Sadie, the blonde girl, trembled as she clutched a worn scarf in her hands. "I only wanted a quiet life on a little farm. He accused my father of horse theft, then took me as collateral. My father hanged himself the next day. I have nowhere left to go." The firelight danced in the dark eyes of Violet, the quietest of the five. She lowered a small leather pouch to the floor. Inside, papers, land deeds, forged seals, contracts, and maps evidence. "We do not just carry scars, we carry proof. He thought hanging us would bury everything. But as you can see, we are still breathing." The room fell silent, save for the wind howling through cracks in the boards. Elias looked at each face. Grace, steady as stone. Ruby, burning hot. Sadie, shaken but still holding on. Violet, quiet and sharp. And Clarabelle, the black-haired one, silent as a coal about to catch flame. Clarabelle leaned toward Elias, her eyes glowing in the firelight. "You thought you came here to claim a cabin, but this land, this is a battlefield, and Morrison does not allow bystanders. You cut us down. That means you chose a side." Elias said nothing. He simply reached forward, adding another log to the fire. The sparks leapt up, lighting the worn, withered face of a frontier man. In that silence, he knew one thing for certain. His past had finally caught up to him, and fate had bound him to these 5 women in a war that was no longer theirs alone. The next morning, the valley was cloaked in a thick, heavy fog. Elias sat on the porch step, holding a steaming cup of coffee, his Winchester resting beside him. He could hear every faint breath from inside the cabin, every small movement from the women who had just escaped the noose. But that fragile moment of peace did not last long. In the distance, hoofbeats echoed, at first scattered, then faster, pounding like war drums. Elias set down the cup, eyes narrowing toward the dusty red trail that led into the fields. The fog began to lift, revealing 3 black horses. They stopped at the top of a rise, silently watching the cabin. The man in front wore a long coat, broad-shouldered and upright in the saddle. Even from a distance, Elias could see the way the man's hand rested on the grip of his revolver, calm, as if human life was just another number. Claribel stepped out onto the porch, her black hair tangled, still shadowing the rope-marked side of her face. She whispered, voice cold as ice, "It is Morrison. He knows we survived." Ruby rushed to the window, fury lighting up her face. "I knew it. He will not let us go. That pack of vultures will tear us apart if they get the chance." Suddy clung tightly to Grace's hand, trembling, while Violet stood still and silent, her eyes hard as polished stone. Elias looked at them, then slowly rose and reached for his Winchester. He did not need to say a word. The decision was already written in the steel of his gaze. Hoofbeats again. Not just 3, now dozens. One by one, riders emerged from the tree line, joining the formation. Torchlight flared through the mist as they spread out, slowly circling the cabin like wolves closing in on prey. Grace gripped Elias's arm. Her voice shook, but her words were firm. "You still have a way out. We do not go now, and you might live." Elias shook his head gently. He placed his calloused hand on the stock of his rifle, voice low and gravelly like stone rolling over stone. "I made my choice last night. This is my land now, and it is our fortress." Claribel looked at him, green eyes blazing in the fading firelight. She stepped closer and handed Elias a worn dagger, its blade dulled with time. "If you are going to stand with us, then know this. This is no longer about inheritance. This is war." Outside, a horse neighed loud and wild. Dust swirled. The Morrison gang descended the slope as the fog gave way to the bloodthirsty faces of men. The old cabin had become a fortress, and every breath inside was bracing for a night of fire and fury. Night fell faster than usual. Darkness swallowed the valley whole, with only the flickering torchlight of Morrison's men piercing the gloom. More than 20 gunmen stood shoulder to shoulder, their laughter loud and cruel. Horses snorted and pawed at the earth like they already tasted victory. Inside the cabin, Elias checked the rounds in his Winchester, each one clicking into place with a dry, metallic snap. He looked over at the 5 women. The rope marks still marred their skin, but their eyes blazed with fire. He handed Ruby an old Colt, gave Sadie a sawed-off shotgun, slipped Violet a hunting knife, and a derringer tucked into her sleeve. Grace clutched a worn-out musket, while Claribel gripped a Navy Colt like it was a part of her arm. "We are not just fighting to survive," Elias said, his voice low and steady. "We are fighting to end their hangman's game for good." Outside, Morrison rode forward, his voice echoing. "Hand them over. That cabin ain't yours, Ward. Cut them loose yesterday, and you signed your death warrant today." Elias stepped onto the porch, voice hoarse but unshakable. "This land belonged to Jeremiah, and now it is mine. If you want it, you'll have to go through me." Before the words had finished, a gunshot cracked the night. A bullet splintered the wooden gate post. The wolves charged like a flood. Elias ducked back inside and slammed the door shut. Gunfire exploded. Windows shattered. Ruby screamed and fired, the shot tearing through a man scrambling onto the porch. Sadie, trembling, eyes shut tight, pulled the trigger on the shotgun. The blast blew the door apart, dropping 2 men in a red rain. Violet waited in silence. Hidden in the shadows, she struck with her knife, flashing into a raider's throat as he slipped inside. He thrashed, then dropped to the floor, eyes wide in shock. Grace pulled Sadie back, then lit a jar of kerosene and hurled it out the window. Flames roared up, halting the charge of the horses. Morrison barked orders, his men fanning out and firing blindly. Bullets ripped through the walls, gun smoke thickened the air, wooden shards flying like knives. Elias dropped low, calmly working the Winchester's lever. One shot, one rider falling. In the chaos, Claribel rushed to Elias's side, firing 2 shots. The smoke curled around her face, her green eyes lit with fury and pride in the firelight. Screams, gunshots, and hoarse cries blended into a symphony of hell. Night had swallowed the valley, darkness thick as smoke, but the cabin burned like a defiant heartbeat in the wilderness. Outside, Morrison's men circled like wolves, torches piercing the fog, hooves pounding a war drum. Elias stood on the porch, Winchester in hand, eyes silver gray, calm but lethal. Behind him, the 5 women, Claribel, Grace, Ruby, Setty, and Violet, ready themselves, weapons in hand, bodies scarred but hearts unbroken. The wind carried the bitter scent of rope and blood, the scent of battles yet to come. Hand them over. Morrison's voice cut through the night, cold as steel. That cabin ain't yours, Ward. You cut those ropes yesterday, and you signed your death warrant today. Elias's jaw clenched. This land belonged to Jeremiah, and now it is mine. If you want it, you'll have to go through me. Gunfire erupted immediately. A bullet splintered the wooden gate post. The men surged forward. Ruby screamed and fired. Setty's shotgun roared, and Violet's knife flashed. In shadows, striking down a raider before he could reach the cabin. Grace hurled a jar of kerosene, flames roaring, halting the charge of horses. Chaos ruled the night. Wooden shards flew, bullets whined through the air, horses cried in panic. Elias moved with deadly precision, each lever pull of the Winchester dropping Morrison's men like wheat before a scythe. Claribel fired 2 shots beside him, eyes ablaze with fury, while the others protected the cabin with a ferocity born of survival. Smoke and fire danced in the night, reflecting in eyes hardened by betrayal and pain, yet burning with unbroken resolve. At last, Morrison himself appeared, tall, black coat billowing, silver revolver gleaming. His sneer was cold, but behind it flickered the first hint of fear. Ward, you think you saved them? All you've done is dig a bigger grave for yourself. Elias stepped forward, shoulder bleeding, voice unwavering. I made my choice when I cut those ropes. Your law ends here. Claribel moved swiftly, producing papers that proved every forged contract, every bought sheriff and judge, every crime. Violet held up a silver locket, proof of Morrison's hidden crimes, a woman he thought long dead now alive and bearing witness. Morrison's fury roared. He raised his pistol, but Elias was faster. 2 shots thundered into the night, one bullet tearing into Morrison's shoulder, forcing him to drop the gun. Ruby stepped forward, her blue eyes flames of justice. Your time is up, Morrison. From this day on, it's you who will hang. The tide had turned. The remaining henchmen faltered as the distant thunder of Marshal Thompson's riders approached, badges glinting in the moonlight. Silence fell over the cabin once more. Morrison, now powerless, was dragged away, rage frozen on his face. Elias looked to the 5 women, their faces lit by firelight, rope marks still visible but hearts fierce. Claribel spoke softly. We didn't survive by luck. We survived because he cut the ropes. Elias nodded silently, blood and sweat on his face, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. The cabin had transformed from a symbol of terror into a fortress of justice, built from courage, trust, and unbroken resolve. Days later, peace settled like dust over the valley. Elias rebuilt the cabin gate, boards and nails forming a new beginning. Setty replanted the garden. Ruby tended the horses. Violet organized evidence to secure justice in court. Grace managed the household with stern warmth. And Claribel stood beside Elias each evening, green eyes catching the last rays of the sun. Around the fire, Elias spoke, voice firm yet tender. Some ropes are made to kill, but when you find the courage to cut them, they become the ties that bind. I thought I inherited a cabin, but the truth is, I inherited all of you. Claribel placed her hand on his, and in that simple gesture, a bond formed stronger than fear, betrayal, or bloodshed. The little cabin stood beneath the moonlight, no longer a place of cruelty, but a stronghold where trust, freedom, and family had been forged through ashes and fire. The West was harsh, unforgiving, and full of betrayal, but it was also a land where courage could turn chains into ties, and the unlikeliest alliances into family. Elias knew that justice, once claimed, must be held fiercely, and in the silent valley, with firelight flickering across determined faces, a new legacy was born, one of bravery, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond of those who refused to back down.